don't.
Man, you're running like a beta male. Are you a beta male? Beta! Beta male!
Good enough to believe that the phrase beta male means anything.
You are a beta male. I'm surprised you, well, not surprised you're a leftist. If you were not a beta male, you wouldn't be a leftist.
Yeah, because a sign of being secure in your masculinity.
No, you're beta.
And say, oh, I'm not a beta male. I'm not a beta male. You know, you're a beta male.
Beta.
Ridiculous, Jesse.
Beta.
The fact that you feel need to resort to this nonsense.
Let me ask you, Ben,
shows that you know that you don't have a leg to stand on in the argument.
Ben.
If you had an argument, you'd make it. You don't have an argument for your views.
Ben.
So making it, you rely on nonsensical taunts about
Ben.
male and try to disguise your arguments as questions. It's pathetic.
Ben, where does logic come from?
Logic is about how the premise.
I didn't ask what is it about. I asked where does it come from?
I have no idea what you even mean by that.
I didn't think so. So let me ask, and you're a professor.
Is your answer that it comes from God? Is that where you're going with this?
You are a professor of philosophy at Rutgers, right? And yeah, you have no logic. You don't even know where it comes from.
Oh, really? I have no logic because I keep on trying to explain what's wrong with your arguments, and you keep talking over me and claiming you're not making arguments. You're just asking questions as if you didn't know that there was such a thing as a loaded question. I keep trying to focus on the arguments, and you're trying to do this petty schoolyard taunt about beta males.
Beta! Let me ask Ben. Ben, do you support abortion? You in favor of abortion?
I don't believe that the state should force anybody to remain.
I didn't ask that. I didn't ask that. Do you support abortion?
I support abortion rights.
Do you support abortion ban?
Do you mean that I think everybody is pregnant? Like, what do you mean support abortion? I support.
Are you for?
I think abortion should be legal. Is that what you're asking?
You think abortion should be? Do you support abortion personally? Are you in support of abortion?
Do I think that women should?
That's not. What's wrong with you?
Because you're being very unclear, Jesse.
I asked, do you support abortion? How is that unclear?
Okay. Well, I said I support abortion rights, but you said that's not what you mean. Do I think abortion is wrong? No, I don't. I think that people should be able to make whatever decision. Fallacy I talk about in the book is begging the question, and begging the question is when you're assuming what you're trying to prove, which is what you're doing right now. You have a
why are you pretending not to see it?
To the assumption that you're right and I'm wrong about all this, and you're asking why I'm denying the truth. What I'm saying is that you are denying the truth. That as a matter of fact, it's just not true. That
are you an honest man, Ben?
Yes, I am. I don't believe you are.
So, do you agree with me that the left have no logic?
So when we talk about poverty, when we talk about wealth, we have to first acknowledge the centrality of the moral and the spiritual. And what I mean by that is we have to fundamentally believe that poor brothers and sisters of all colors, genders, regional identity, sexual orientations, religion have exactly the same value as the well-to-do. That's a fundamental moral commitment. And the only way you can account for the level of poverty, 1 out of 2 black and brown children under 6 years old living in poverty in the richest nation in the history of the world, the only way you can account for that is a callousness and indifference, not just in high places, but even lukewarmness among the middle classes who are so preoccupied with their individual situation, they've lost sight of brothers and sisters who are in hoods and barrios, and white brothers and sisters, red brothers and sisters on reservations, and then the decrepit school systems, and then the indecent housing, and then unemployment, and then mass incarceration, and then the various attacks, and then the spiritual warfare. The spiritual warfare, which is to convince them that, lo and behold, they give up or sell out rather than straighten their backs up and fight for justice. That's what this campaign is about in general. I know we're not here to talk primarily about the campaign, because I want to salute Working Hero Action. And they're going to interview all the different presidential candidates. That's fine. But the litmus test is going to be, how committed are they in execution? Not just pretty words, not just discerning their deepest conviction about what the latest polls say, but I'm talking about who are they really? And who has been consistent? That's this issue of poverty and wealth as it relates to this election. And of course, that's one of the reasons why I'm with my dear brother, Bernie Sanders.
Beta. We're going to need to reclaim that for the left. I'm Michael Brooks. This is the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else. It's a producer.
What's up?
Matt Leck. Chief economist David Griscom.
How's it going?
And of course, Vic Viana. He's our filmmaker. He's in studio along with all of the members of the TMBS crew. All thoroughly non-beta. We're going to have to talk with Burgess about that in the postgame. I want to make sure that he represented properly for Logic, our publisher Zero Books, and the TMBS brand. Beta. That would be so awesome if that really could just... I'd like Bernie to adopt some of that in the next debate. It's like, how are your numbers square up on expenditures under Medicaid? Beta.
Jesse Lee Peterson went to bed that night thinking, I won that argument.
Jesse Lee Peterson went to bed that night thinking, like, I think I did some denting of the logic for the left. On this week's program, Emma Vigeland returns. She's a great reporter for TYT. She's here in studio, her second appearance on TMBS. We're talking about Iran starting to do some enriching, as frankly they should, as the Trump administration has destroyed that deal and escalated threats on them. And then what happens when Andrew Yang meets Meghan McCain? Well, don't worry, Yang people. We're going to have a few nice things to say about Andrew Yang, but maybe also another look at what his proposals would actually mean. He got the current affairs deep dive treatment, sorry to say. We'll also be looking at some other really important things with Emma, including settling once and for all the Marianne Williamson debate, Tom Steyer's delusional, grotesque narcissism, and 2020. Then we have an activist from the Nushatta Foundation. We were able to speak briefly. Our phone line was actually regularly interrupted, but it is important to talk about the occupied Western Sahara by Morocco. We had a bit of a conversation which we'll play, and we're going to introduce you somewhat to that issue and their work. In the gem, David Griscom is talking about water privatization. In the postgame, we have a massive amount of content to get to, including, did Ross Perot own Al Gore on NAFTA? And then a debunk We're going to have to clean up the mess after Ben Burgess revealed as a beta by Jesse Lee Peterson. And of course, a shout out and a whole bunch more on this week's Michael Brooks Show. But first, let's go to Hong Kong, where protests have been ongoing against a bill that would have seen extraditions from Hong Kong to mainland China. Let's start with this clip of the Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, explaining that the extradition bill, as for now, the chief executive, Lam, explains, is dead.
But there are still lingering doubts about the government's sincerity, or worries whether the government will restart the process in the Legislative Council. So I reiterate here, there is no such plan. The bill is dead.
So what happened was massive protests started last month against the proposed extradition bill, which would have allowed the extradition, as I said, from citizens of Hong Kong to mainland China. This bill threatens civil liberties of Hong Kong citizens and labor activists inside Hong Kong who report on and document abuses inside the People's Republic of China. Authorities, the protesters stormed Parliament in July 1st, and protesters sprayed graffiti inside the buildings. Authorities began to arrest protesters, claiming more arrests will be made in the future. Last Sunday, protesters marched to areas frequented by mainland tourists. Police have suppressed protesters with tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons. And as you saw there, Carrie Lam has finally, as of now, backed down. Some elected officials with ties to Beijing have asked for amnesty for those arrested. And so what this sort of shows more broadly is that there is obviously limits to Hong Kong's democracy. Beijing wields significant influence in no small part because of the bureaucratic and indirect system of political control. The chief executive of Hong Kong is selected through a 1,200-member election committee, making it easier for pro-Beijing and incidentally pro-business forces to maintain political control. In 1997, the United Kingdom gave up control of Hong Kong, which was still, as of 1997, in fact, a colonial asset of the United Kingdom. It was returned to the People's Republic of China, and it was given something called one country, two systems. Hong Kong could maintain its relative openness and democracy, but it would be, in fact, part of China. And this balance has been steadily eroded and undermined. In addition to limits on direct democracy, corporate power is also well represented in Hong Kong's parliament. Legislative Council has 70 members with 4-year terms, and 35 members are selected through geographical constituencies, with 35 functional constituencies which represent professional or interest group from the financial services sector to welfare constituencies. And so let's look at the character of these protests. You know, a lot of us have this very strong, I would say, Trotskyite impulse. And this is a Trotskyite impulse that I have profound sympathy with, which is that basically wherever in the world you see people protesting, demanding greater freedom, demanding greater justice, the instinct, and I think almost always the correct instinct, is to sympathize with them. And of course, we don't want to discard that instinct, but we have to complexify what exactly we're talking about here. Not in the aim of opposing these protests. These protests are actually very important and very essential. But like the Yellow Vest movement in France, which was a powerful and positive force against Macron, neoliberalism and austerity, but also certainly maintained reactionary and rightist elements, we need to make distinctions before we have full solidarity. So the protests are not one social force. They include young people and students, liberals and socialists, as well as almost Hong Kong localists or nationalists. It should be noted that the right-wing variant of localism has a strong anti-government, anti-immigrant bias, and it preaches a Hong Konger first ideology. They either want Hong Kong independence or a return to British rule. They use horrific terminology to describe immigrants, including the term locusts. This is obviously on the incredibly negative side of some elements of the protests, although, of course, their concern about maintaining openness is obviously valid. Finance and business are split. Some of the wealthy class are afraid of submitting to Communist Party power and regulation. However, others oppose protests and that have close and synchronized business relationships with the mainland and with the Communist Party. Beijing wants to be able to increase its ability to punish dissidents in Hong Kong. And if Beijing is able to extradite journalists critical of the party and labor activists, it will have a chilling effect on liberative democracy, as well as on necessary documentations on events and labor abuses inside the PRC. So look, there's multiple tendencies here. And there's also, as with all of these events, you will have rightist forces in the United States that want to push, almost at this point, we could say, a new Cold War focused on China. They will use any of these events, and including the absolutely rightful concerns of, as an example, labor activists, to try to push a nationalistic, right-wing, xenophobic approach to China here. This is another another trap that we need to vigorously resist and avoid. So there's multiple tendencies inside this movement, from liberal to socialist to Hong Kong localists. Western simplifications ignore some of the right-wing trends and even some of the outright xenophobia of the protests. Pro-Beijing simplification ignores the genuine need for change in Hong Kong and the undemocratic oligarchic political structure of the former colony, which, let's face it, there is a reason why the chief executive herself initially tried to pass this pro-chilling effect bill on behalf of Beijing. As is usually the case with China, we can note and acknowledge has lifted an unbelievable amount of its own citizens out of poverty in the last couple of decades, but has obviously developed a close and sustained relationship with business and oligarchs across the globe, and there's no difference in its relationship with Hong Kong. So we are in total solidarity with democracy activists in Hong Kong, with labor activists, with those that don't want to be under the hegemony of any large state. And we also reject any reactionary tendencies here that would try to absorb the correct resistance in Hong Kong with a reactionary approach to the People's Republic of China globally and in the Asia Pacific specifically. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
I think just adding and making sure that people recognize too that Hong Kong is one of the most unequal societies in the world. Housing prices are absolutely unaffordable for anyone on a working class salary. In fact, they rival cities like London and New York and have lower average wages for working people. So you see what happens, unfortunately, in that situation. Hong Kong has been a migrant city for a long time, where you have a lot of inequality and an imposed scarcity. And sometimes that was able for right-wing elements to be able to develop very nasty kind of xenophobic rhetoric from it. That being said, the protests definitely are predominantly liberal, and there's a good amount of socialists in there too. So it's been very important to see this kind of pushback against a system that's been very undemocratic for a long time, without falling into kind of pro-Western trap, but also not falling into a reactionary anti-imperialist trap, right? Where you are characterizing an entire group of people by the actions of a few, which is absolutely the wrong thing, and people on the left really need to be more careful about that, not falling into that trap.
Absolutely. Matt? All right, folks, we're going to go to the shout out, and we have 2 new shout out tracks to try. So, Matt, or where are we at in the process here?
All right, so I believe I'm trying to get these both in order, but to credit the right people. But high level shout out theme. This is by Sean.
Yeah, and Sean is from the band Nervous Curtains.
Okay.
And you should definitely check them out on Spotify. They have a new single out, and their album's coming out, I think, in August.
Check it out, Sean and Nervous Curtains. As always, of course, DJ Danarchy, the genius behind so much of the sonic experience at TMBS, but a new shout out from some new contributors. All right, this is Sean of Nervous Curtains. Shout out, shout out, shout out.
My brain is still in recovery mode.
Shout out, shout out.
My brain is still in recovery mode.
I like
shout
it. It's
out,
kind of like the Beverly Hills
taking in so many high-level important ideas.
Shout out, shout out.
From taking in so many high-level important ideas. The dial of ideas. I like talking about ideas. High level.
the exchange of ideas.
Shout out.
High level. Still in recovery mode.
Looking forward to sharing more ideas.
Ooh, this will work good. You can maybe start the shout out over the end bit here. But do you want to play the next one?
I like that. It's dope. All right. The next one is, I believe, is from Ed or Moondog?
Mundo.
Mundo. My bad. Go ahead. Mundo with the second shout out.
I'm looking for a remix, and now the shout out.
Pile of ideas was turned to low because it's quickly moving into the hot position.
And now the shout out.
Shout out.
Pause the video. Recovery mode.
Shout
My
out.
brain is
Shout out. Shout out.
Geopolitical politics.
Shout out.
competition would start kicking in.
Shout out.
I'm not funded by the Koch brothers.
Shout out.
Do some research for yourself.
Those are both excellent, very strong contenders. First, I just want to say really quickly, last week our cold open was an essay by Albert Einstein on why socialism. And it was written, or excuse me, not written by Einstein, obviously, but the version we used was read by Non-Compete, who I believe has a really good YouTube channel. And he is at American Johnson. So it's EMERICAN Johnson on Twitter, and he read that piece. The shout out goes to activists and some local politicians who are trying to basically, as a net result of the Keystone Pipeline battle, and we'll play some B-roll of this now. If you recall, obviously in 2016 there was a significant effort to stop this horrific pipeline, which is jeopardizing and on top of already so many policies that have damaged the ecology and the health of so many indigenous people in the United States. And you could see this pipeline as sort of like a full kind of like raw extension of this country's colonialism and legacy of genocide against indigenous people. And so some activists were looking to pull money out of Wells Fargo, which is a bank that helped, secure loans and financing for the project. And it was a way of local politicians to put their, resources on a city and municipal levels where they wanted it to be. One major effort is being headed up by Kashama Sawant. I'm reading here from a piece in Yes Magazine. She's, of course, the great Socialist City Council member in Chicago. We want an avenue through which ordinary people can access banking and services regardless of income in a way that does not engage in any exploitative practices. And she's co-sponsor of a divestment ordinance in the Seattle City Council. As of today, the Bank of North Dakota is the only state bank in the continental United States. And I'm quoting again now, it was founded in 1919, and for bank advocates, it serves as a model. And so there's a push inside the City Council of Seattle, as well as other municipalities, to allocate money and resources. In December 2017, this is in Seattle, City Council members voted to allocate $100,000 to conduct a feasibility study for a municipal bank. The study was released in October 2018 and concluded that the creation of a public bank would be an involved and long-term process. One of the next steps identified was for the city of Seattle to develop a business plan for municipal banks that would meet all legal and regulatory requirements in Washington. This is a really powerful and positive step because, in fact, it will be a long, durable, and radical process to take city budgets and other areas where there's really a significant amount of investment and liquidity and take it out of exploitive, extractive institutions like Wells Fargo. And when you use state banks like that, the first step is you stop supporting atrocities like Keystone. The second step is, of course, you have banks, bank services, just like you could do postal banking, which stops so much of the income discrimination of banking and take away payday lending and all these other incredibly extractive, abusive financial services, parts of the financial services sector that prey on low-income people. And then you can also start using the other side of the virtuous cycle, which is that the profits and the revenue generated from that bank can be used to fund everything from parks, recreation, public health, and all sorts of other excellent community needs. So this is actually a really significant step and exactly the type of real power that a really important local politician like Kosama Sawant can assert on a level of a municipality. So shout out to anti-Keystone activists taking the next steps in the strategic counterweight to how projects like that pipeline actually get funded. Do we have some more? Do we have some interstitial ready? Yeah, let's do a little pitch before we go to the interview. So, guys, as I say every week, and it's true every week, we have a really massive amount, 2-to-1 extra content if you become a patron. We have illicit histories that cover global politics from Europe to Africa, from the Middle East to Latin America, and in the future, the next waves are actually going to be in South Asia and North Asia as well. Then we have the think tanks. We just recorded one where we take questions from patrons on the Discord, chop them up, have a really fun time. Then we have post games, which are a whole different experience. We take your calls, we take your Discord questions, we play videos, we have a lot of fun. It's sort of like the main show, which takes a huge amount of effort too, and all of your memberships and funding make everything possible. The ideal is to kind of give you a taste of every single aspect of what we do. And then the post game, we're, not always, but sometimes we're going more heavy on the kind of entertainment side. And then in the Sunday show, we want to give you really, really still engaging and fun, but seriously nutrient-dense content that can really give you a grip for understanding as many aspects of politics, how the world works, as we can possibly think of. So our next kind of general goal, which I think we can get to pretty soon, conservatively, is 2,500 patrons. The next real goal is 3,000 patrons. We certainly want to get there before the end of the year. I'd like to get to above that before the end of the year. Become a patron today. Patreon.com/TMBS. Some of you had problems with the payment system on Patreon. I apologize. Just keep working on it. They'll give you a ticket. Sometimes people just set up new accounts with new cards. I'm apologize. It's a hassle. I'll just say that, part of the investment that we do for the future is starting to look at having other systems that we could possibly use in the future in addition to Patreon. The other thing you get if you are a comrade or above patron is regular Skype conference calls with me, and then the video illicit histories that Vic puts together. After several weeks of them only being available for patrons, we release them to the general public because we're really proud of them and they're really high quality. The ones that we've released so far on Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition and on the States' Rights Myth, Race, and Medicaid, those are both on the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. If you haven't watched them yet, I would definitely watch them. And if you're in a position to become a $21 a month or above patron, you'll get a lot more, obviously, influence over the content we cover, and you can really support making these videos possible, which I know have actually already had some really nice impacts. August 24th, we're in Chicago. It's our third live show. We packed Brooklyn. We packed LA. Don't let us down, Midwest. Come on. We want that same kind of love. We're going to have an incredible time. Gene Bajlan, he's one of our regulars. We've done so much content on Kurdistan, on Iran, but he's also a shit talker from Hull in the United Kingdom, which is like some type of city that they make like fucking Office episodes around. So he'll be fun. And then I'm very proud and very excited to announce that Chuck Mertz, who is host of This Is Hell, this is really one of the most like iconic, legendary Chicago leftist talk shows, long format radio and podcasts. He's also somebody else who's done a lot of work, as we have with Brian Mayer, covering what's really happening in Brazil, the political imprisonment of Lula da Silva, and a whole bunch of other content. It's going to be really fun to have him out there on stage with us, because we like to have each city we go to get the best flavor of possible of it. That's why, of course, in LA, we had Anna Kasparian, Nando Vila, Big Waz. In Brooklyn, we have Bhaskar, we have Trevor Beaulieu, we have Alona Minkowski, we have Mike Racine. Getting the energy of each place. And I think a big part of Chicago, of leftist Chicago, is definitely This Is Hell Radio. So go get your tickets. There's a VIP option where you can come hang out with us in the beginning. And then there's general admittance. We take audience questions. We play games. We have a huge amount of fun. Get your tickets today. In the next coming weeks, there's going to be a lot more videos, some of which I'll be live streaming independently of this, that are going to be much more focused on Against the Web, the cosmopolitan socialist answer to the IDW and the New Right. I'm incredibly excited and proud about this book that's going to be published in the fall by Zero Books. It's been amazing to write about Amartya Sen. It's been amazing to realize that the African National Congress's Freedom Charter could be a great alternative to all of the frustration and agita of the Jordan Peterson devotee. And putting Sam Harris in context has been highly satisfying. That's all I can say. So here's what we're going to do now, folks. And of course, patreon.com/TMBS. I apologize. We stitched together two parts of this interview, and we're going to play this intro first. We'll play that in a second. So Mansour is an activist in the Moroccan-occupied Western Sahara. The Western Sahara was given independence by Spain in the 1970s. It was recognized by the sort of relevant international institutions at the time as its own sovereign state. Is this playing his B-roll in the background? Or play this after I'm talking? Okay, great. So right after this was done, basically the Moroccan military went in and occupied it. From 1975 to 1991, there was armed conflict. There was a government recognized by the African Union, PASARO, as representing the rightful representatives of the Western Sahara. The Moroccans have not let go, including after in the 90s and the aughts, there was some negotiation. Jim Baker, actually, George H.W. Bush's Secretary of State, was a UN special envoy on this. And he actually negotiated some basically referendums that would have actually even stopped short of full independence, but would have given just genuine autonomy. This is an occupation. It's an occupation like the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And similarly, it's also driven by a lot of natural resource needs. And demands and exploitation of the Moroccan government. There's phosphate there. There's fisheries. There's other key strategic assets that the Moroccan government is occupying and taking from the Western Sahara. And the Western Sahara, while having a fair amount of recognition, is marginalized in the global system as this occupation continues to take place. Mansour, which is not his real name, is a media activist for the Nushatta Foundation. We're going to share more of their work. We want more people to know about this. This is also somebody who's connected through Bill Fletcher Jr., who is obviously a very important person to me and a very important person to this show. So we did the interview with Mansour, and I want to be clear, I'm not going to over-dramatize it. I don't know that much, but there was a small degree of risk in him even talking to us, and the connection was really bad. So we've stitched together, I think, only about, like 7 or 8 minutes of interview. Not even. But we're going to play what we got, even if it's just 5 minutes. I want to set the stage for it. I give a little bit of a recap. We're going to try to do more with him. And first, we're going to play this clip. I actually am doing this in reverse order. I realized when we pre-recorded this, I promised more clips. There won't be clips on the other side of it. We're going to play this clip first. It's 37 seconds that introduces the Nushatta channel's YouTube channel. I will say, if you watch their videos in general, there's a lot of incredible brutality and violence in the Moroccan security services that you will see. But this is a kind of broad overview. Then we're going to take a few minutes. I'm sorry, it's very poor quality, but again, it's an important voice. He took the risk and made the time to speak to us from the Moroccan occupied territories in the Western Sahara. Even if it's 5 or 6 minutes with a choppy connection, we're going to honor it and play it. That's a major part of who we are and what this show is about. And we will then have a little bit of a recap from me, and we will definitely continue to cover this issue. And they're going to be documenting, as I say, there's a lot of very brutal videos documenting the reality of what's taking place there. We're going to take, how long is it actually exactly, Matt?
We got 2 separate clips here. So the first one is 2 minutes 20. The second one is a minute and a half.
All right, so we're going to just play these back to back, and then we'll come back, and we're going to continue to cover this, guys. It's important. This is the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is, we'll be calling him Mansour. He's a media activist at the Nushatta Foundation, which is based in the occupied Western Sahara. Mansour, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Brock, for having me tonight on your show, and it's really a great opportunity for me and for my people to share with you our stories. Thank you.
So, can you tell us what is the story behind the occupation of the Western Sahara, and who occupies it? Morocco occupies the Western Sahara. What's the history?
Yeah, after the withdrawal of Spain in 17th, Morocco invaded the Western Sahara forcibly. And the military invasion by Morocco to Western Sahara led to a humanitarian catastrophe in Western Sahara, where the majority of people had been to flee to the refugee camps because of the military occupation of Morocco.
Why does Morocco occupy the Western Sahara? And when Spain left, was Western Sahara recognized by the international community as an independent nation before the Moroccan invasion?
Yes, before the Moroccan invasion, Western Sahara was considered as one of the territory that hasn't self-governing. So what we can say, what happened to Western Sahara is a part only of the colonization by Morocco. It's agreed by the occupation and neighboring states. So it is like what happened in Africa and for other colonies.
And what resources are in the Western Sahara? What are there important phosphate, mineral, oil? What natural resources?
The natural sources are too many. We have fisheries, we have phosphate, we have sands, and so on.
Welcome back. This is the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now, go another 5 minutes. I just want to finish this. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so you were just saying that Western Sahara has phosphate, it has sand, it has fisheries, it has other important resources. How many years has Morocco occupied the Western Sahara for?
Morocco has been occupying Western Sahara since 1975, and there was a negotiation between Morocco and the Polisario, which is actually the representative of the people of Western Sahara.
And the Polisario is a group that governs and advocates for the independence of the people of the Western Sahara.
Polisario, it stands for the Sahrawi Rebel Liberation Movement, that aim to put an end to Morocco presence in Western Sahara. And it was founded in 1973. Polisario founded a state which is recognized by the African Union, and now Western Sahara is considered as a country in the African Union and neighbor to Morocco. And both now Morocco and Western Sahara states are members in that union. So, but in the other hand, there's the United Nations doesn't recognize Western Sahara as a state, but only as a liberation movement that represents the people of Western Sahara.
I said something. Oh, okay. So, folks, apologies for that. The connection is difficult, and we kept cutting out. But yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line. This is the the sort of much lesser well-known occupation, but it is analogous in some pretty crucial ways to what's happening in Israel-Palestine. And it's also quite brutal. and it's also, very predominant natural resource extraction with phosphates in particular, and we're going to cover this more. But as of now, please look up the Nushatta Foundation. And as of right now, we have to get to David Griscom. And I just realized, David, that apparently the gem graphic, economic is misspelled on it.
That's pretty funny. Well,
yeah, so I don't know if that's like a Richard Wolff move to fuck with you and make us look bad.
That's pretty funny.
But economic is misspelled on the graphic. I think it's spelled economic. Economic.
I see. I mean, it might just be hard to read.
No, it's spelled an economic minute. So are you trying to be ironic, David?
What are you talking about? I don't make these graphics. I don't know.
Hey, I don't know what you do. I think you're very attentive to your public brand perception, David. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, man. Well, talking about...
So would you like to talk about water privatization?
You're making me so uncomfortable because
I'm sorry.
I've lived in the north now for a little bit, and I feel like my Texas accent gets messed up, and I can't pronounce half the words I try to go about. So don't put that on me right now.
Economics, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking economics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone's noticed, it's hot as hell outside. It's been hot as hell across the world. We're seeing record heat all across the globe, and it's starting to hit at a very important issue that we need to be talking about much more. Specifically, India, where extreme heat and drought have led that hundreds of villages have been evacuated in search of water. Delhi has had a massive drought, and southern India has had a significant drought as well. And, this is caused by extreme heat, mismanagement, and also a boom in industrial agriculture. But what you see on the other side of it, where water prices skyrocket, where the only people who have access to clean and potable water are the wealthy, is a vision of a very, very threatening trend, not just in India, but also all over the globe. At least 2/3 of the global population, that's around 4 billion people, live with severe water scarcity at least 1 month every year. And that's only going to get worse over the next decade as global warming starts to take more of an effect. Now, when we're talking about water scarcity, factory farming has a massive impact on it, but it's also climate change, obviously, and that is also comes out of a constant search for short-term profits at the loss of the majority of the population. But the fact is that water scarcity isn't a problem that we need to be facing if we were just bolder and more equitable in the way that we create our water systems across the globe. There are proposals out there, for example, by the Corporate Accountability Institute, which is a nonprofit watchdog, specifically around water organizations, that with just the current investment already in water infrastructure, by 2025, with just $90 billion more in investment, we could live in a situation where everybody has adequate water. But of course, under global capitalism, there are always those who want to make money out of a crisis. Now, over the past few decades, you've seen, especially in developing countries, a real fetish for water privatization and specifically partnering with private organizations, the famous public-private partnership. And we know that public-private partnerships are very skilled at extracting huge amounts of value out of very important social programs. Exceptionally skilled. But there's been a bit of a pushback because the price of water in areas where it's controlled by a private organization rather than a public organization is significantly higher. But it's not just in developing countries that this is a problem. In the United States, a company, you might have heard of it, called Nestle, makes obscene amounts of money by tapping into our publicly controlled water system. Outside of San Bernardino, Nestle pays $524 a year. $524 a year to extract millions of liters of water from public aquifers. Just 2 hours from Flint, Nestle pays a paltry $250,000 a year to extract water from public aquifers in Michigan. This is going in areas right next to areas that are facing severe water shortages. And what Nestle is very successful at doing has been going to municipalities that are in need of quick cash or in needs of promise of investment or whatever. And they come in there and they start pulling out water from these natural aquifers and making massive profits. I mean, this is not chump change. Just last year, the bottled water industry in the United States was a $16 billion industry. And obviously, this gets much worse when we're talking about countries like Mexico, American companies like the Constellation Brewers, which makes Modelo, Corona, and Ballast Point, has basically created a drought-like situation in Mexicali because they're able to work with corrupt officials. In Canada, which is home of 1/5 of the world's fresh water supply, First Nations peoples face water shortages just outside of Toronto by one of the largest aquifers in the world. Nestle has a massive contract where they're able to extract millions of liters of water just up the road from places where people are having to catch rainwater, which is dangerous and it's filled with bacteria, and they're having massive health effects. This is happening down the road from Nestle's extraction plants. So when we're talking about privatization, there's two questions. One, do we have public control over the water in the first place? And two, can we trust our municipalities to not be so neoliberal that they're making contracts with these highly extractive and dangerous industries? In Chile, there are massive issues with access to water where people oftentimes throughout the year do not have access to water through the public through their taps, because under Pinochet they privatized the industry. And what it means is that people in those areas of the world pay significantly more for their water than in other areas. So there's a twofold fight that we need to do. As socialists, we really need to be vigilant about this, because as water becomes more scarce over the next few years because of capitalism, because of climate change, there's going to be more of a crackdown to create more efficiency and market-based solutions for an absolutely essential part of life. And I'm here to tell you right now that that is not the answer. That is absolutely the worst thing that we can do, because if you give these people access and to control our water supply, they will be able to control us, quite literally. And the fact is that, especially in the United States, we're in a good situation where 3/4 of water provided across the country is still publicly owned. But that is under assault left and right. It's been mismanaged a lot by corrupt Republican governments, but also, mismanagement from Democrats as well. And we cannot allow a situation where private corporations are able to profit from taking something that is a public good, extracting it, and turning it into multi-trillion-dollar industry in the future. As a movement, we need to also really be advocating for massive global investment in water across the board, and to move away from the highly extractive industries that have been supported by the World Bank organization to try to push these private industries to control water supplies abroad. This is an absolutely fundamental issue, and it's something that we need to be following through on as much as possible.
So you did well. I'm worried about the graphic. That was good. I just want to add two quick things to that, and then the great Emma Vigeland has arrived to defend Marianne Williamson from Matt's bullshit. And Matt's like, she's do science correctly. She's not supposed to do science correctly, Matt. She's supposed to be cool. Science is not cool. I actually want to start my own meme page called Science Isn't Cool.
That'd be pretty good.
Or I just do all of the cool alternatives to boring science.
Just because she's not doing science correctly doesn't mean she's cool.
It's a pretty long way in my book, but I have an anti-science brand. But I just two things to add to that. One, over a decade ago, when this that type of issue was lighting up in Bolivia, I remember reading about it. And not only were people trying to collect rainwater, they were actually making that illegal. They were trying to clamp down on the collection of rainwater as a way of getting around not being able to get water out of the tap to begin with. And then the other thing is this is another big problem, and I shouldn't have fucked around because now I have a serious point to make. But this is a big problem with the whole frame of you need to get people to accept the science of climate change. At one point, people on the right will, quote, accept the science of climate change, and the answer will be greater authoritarianism.
You're 100% right.
It's going to be complete resource hierarchy politics.
That's already what the climate, that's what the border policy is.
And that's already what's happening. In fact, if you read these policy memos, yes, in the Trump age, it's even more accelerated and ridiculous, and they will deny basic things, but there's other defense-aligned right-wing strategy planning that's the weather's changing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a rapidly deployable, military force to secure our material interests. And that will only be applied to the United States. I mean, look, how much we just had to struggle to get, Harvard to rescind an offer to Rick Schneider, for Christ's sake. So when they, quote-unquote, accept science, the answer will be greater apartheid models for
and
climate
that's the
scarcity.
point is apartheid too. No, actually, I just want to hit that because I wrote that in my notes and I overlooked it. This is a very good concrete example of when people say that climate change is going to affect communities of color and indigenous people and poor communities at a much higher rate than it will affect the rich. This is a perfect example of it. You're already seeing the people who are being excluded from access to water in India are the poor people. The people who are being excluded from access to water in Canada are indigenous people. The people who are being excluded from access to water in the United States are indigenous people, people of color, and working class communities. And this is how these inequities, counteract with the science, right? That's right. But the fact is that when you live in an unequal society, these things are going to have unequal effects on different communities.
That's exactly right. That's what Jeffrey Epstein and I were trying to figure out.
Jesus Christ. No, I can't clip this.
I need to do some levity. Hey, the clip is done. Don't worry about it. Your precious clip is fine. I was reading a book on water actuarial tables in preparation for a meeting with the Malawian finance minister. And they told me it was a plane. I don't know. I was so distracted by playing backgammon with Chris Tucker. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a brief break. And then the great Emma Vigeland is here. And we're going to come back and she's going to be here. We'll be right back. Whoa. I don't see the need to call Vic a beta. Joining us now. I'm such a pest sometimes. Joining us now is Emma Vigeland. She is a reporter for TYT Politics, and you know her. Her work is awesome.
Yeah, it's Rebel HQ now. But
Rebel HQ, excuse me.
Our Twitter handle, I mean, it's really confusing. We're trying to figure out.
It is honestly a little confusing. I don't know what's going on.
We got verified, and then you can't change it without jumping through hoops.
Is Rebel HQ so you can go up to Trump supporters and say, hey, I'm with Rebel HQ? And
it was a show Jank started, and then it evolved into something else, and we just haven't changed the name. But
seriously, does that help?
That actually
Definitely
helped.
must help.
That must help.
100% helped.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say. This Trump supporter interview that we are going to show now, I kept the TYT mic flag on because we were at the debates surrounded by security. But when I go into the Trump rallies, actually, I'm by myself with the camera person. And I take the mic flag off.
Does it help that they're also out of shape?
Yeah.
It's like a little less intimidating because
I mean, it's definitely.
If they try to do anything, they would probably have a cardiac arrest immediately.
Well, I'm in the center of a mob. I'm not where the rest of the media is. So there is I have an adrenaline rush / fear situation when I go. Just because they hate the media so much, and I've seen so much, threats against people in the media and stuff, but I try to be as normal and non-confrontational as possible because you get the best answers out of people. But I take the I take the TYT mic flag off because
they know.
I will sometimes say TYT, I'll sometimes say Rebel HQ, and they're like, oh, Rebel Media. I'm like,
Do you say like? Yeah,
I just go.
Yup, we're rebellious, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't even ask where we're from. They just want to yell into the microphone like the woman I spoke to at the debates.
So the problem with this video for me is that you're making me rediscover my anti-Cuban racism. And I could totally see some like third way bridge building where we stop deportations except for Cubans.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Why don't we reverse the Mariana boat lift? Like Castro was like, okay, sure. You want to have an open season? I'm going to give you all of the worst people in my society. I don't see what's to stop us from doing the same.
Is this a Yang policy proposal, or?
I think Yang does not have the foreign policy expertise to even do this as an irony joke.
I don't know.
But it's niche enough.
It's niche enough. It plays along racial lines in a needless way.
What if we had so there's a decline in white birth rates.
Exactly.
And increasingly robots are going to take your job and have sex with your wife. So the thinking is if we could send people back to Cuba.
And the left would appreciate that because they're right wing.
And the left would appreciate that because they're right-leaning voters. The right would appreciate that because they're still Hispanic and they're not white.
It's a perfect Yang.
That is actually I just stumbled on the perfect Yang proposal, and those people still fucking hate me. Okay.
What?
We won't dwell on this.
Okay.
Who is more insane? Gabbard supporters that feel aggrieved. Yes.
I don't even need
or Yang supporters that feel aggrieved.
Gabbard supporters.
Okay. All right. Well, that's an open and shut case.
Well, I guess I've been more vocal about.
Right.
No one's claiming that Yang is the second most progressive candidate in the race.
Yang fans.
I have literally seen Yang people say that yes.
I mean, man.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like
They've done the math.
He's just right. He wears that hat that says math. Yeah, well, I mean, it's
guaranteed to rub me the wrong way.
And math, like his policies plus implementation equals racist outcomes. That's the math that I see.
Congress just needs more calculating power.
Yeah, right. That's what they need.
The supercomputer.
Yeah. So if we can come together.
Yeah. No. Just I mean, we won't linger on it. But I fight back vociferously against the notion that she's the second most progressive candidate in the race because her record does not bear that out. And I get blowback. So, but I guess on the other side of it, I'm smearing her and I'm a shill.
Total fucking shill.
But, that's just my opinion.
Maybe you should oppose fucking war. Then you wouldn't be a fucking shill.
Born by fact.
I mean, it's weird because I have no problem, and I don't think any of us who've criticized Tulsi have like any problem acknowledging when she makes a right call.
Totally.
I just have a problem like someone demanding that I like enter their fantasy life about somebody else.
Oh yeah.
That's just like where and you know, and it's funny now, especially like as it breaks, like I'm increasingly a sharp critic of Warren. Like to me, like I'm very clear that if, you know, certainly from my perspective, including having a pretty strong focus on the world, like Sanders is the candidate of that. But I don't like, I don't know, the arguments from Warren people that I find disingenuous and annoying are definitely there. But I guess what is problematic for some of them really to me is like, it's not only the assertion that she's like, who's the most progressive or whatever, like, I don't even care. But it's like, how can you look over voting against refugees as an example? Like, to me, it seems like these are like super foundational things from a certain worldview. I don't understand how they're looked over.
Well, did you read? I tweeted out that New York Magazine piece recently. I don't know if you read that whole thing.
I did actually read that piece.
It's really well done, and it's interesting to look back at, you know, how she grew up, and it seems to really inform those inconsistencies. I'm not saying that her foreign policy platform isn't phenomenal and isn't desperately needed. I'm saying that aspects of her record directly contradict that, and so to say that she's the peace candidate is just not accurate. That's Bernie Sanders.
Right.
I mean, and so I'm a bigger fan of Warren than you. And I think it's closer than a lot of people think in terms of like who's 1 and 2. I mean, she's definitely number 2, but I think that everyone else is distant in terms of progressive policy. But Warren's flaws are clear, and it's in foreign policy, and it's also surrounding Medicare for all, although she's attempting to clarify that. But then when you say, oh, Tulsi Gabbard is better on Medicare for all, that's just factually wrong, because in her first term in Congress, she didn't co-sponsor the Conyers bill. She did it in her second term, and she did it after there were hundreds of people already. And I remember specifically tweeting, why hasn't she signed on? It got kind of big, and the next day she signed on.
Maybe because it was a fucking plan. All right. We don't have to keep. I feel like Bill Maher, like, okay, we don't need to upset the Tulsi people again. All right.
I welcome.
I know. I love it. I love the chutzpah. I wonder, like, far be it from me to say, but there are people who advocate for Tulsi and for Yang. And I say this because it was so funny is that people like us get targeted by them. And then we play their role against like CNN reporters on Sanders' behalf.
Right.
Right. Like but it's like, you have to try to at least establish like a hint of like commonality and rapport with the people you're targeting. Like, you can't just go 0 to sellout on Twitter.
That's the cult of personality element, and
right.
There is a significant cult of personality with Tulsi Gabbard supporters. There's a cult of personality on Bernie's side too, even though he's the candidate that I'm immensely supportive of and think he's the best policy-wise candidate in the race. I don't really think that it's close. But, you know, there's some candidates that have cult of personalities. I don't think Warren does.
Oh, really? I actually don't necessarily. I mean, because I do think on one level, I think we're in just in a media space where it's like, look, there's levels of intensity. I'm totally not denying that. But I think to some extent, like a social media strategy for any of these people entails a personality cult.
True. I just think Warren's base is such a mishmash of ideologies at this current moment. There's no coherent ideological base of like the people that are. I mean, when I went to this Warren rally, it was really interesting. There were a lot of establishment people there. You know, people who supported. Say there's a lot. The most consistent second choice was Kamala Harris, but it doesn't make sense to me really because I guess I'm looking at this more from people who are going up against corporate power. I guess my litmus test or the thing that I care most about is a willingness and a gumption to take on corporate power. And I don't think it's close. That's when I say number 1 and 2 for Bernie and Warren. Elizabeth Warren taking on the banks, it's legendary. It's legendary stuff. And Bernie Sanders has been doing it for decades and decades himself. So I guess we all place value on different things. The reason that I'm supportive of those two in that way is because I'm so I admire their gumption and their willingness to take on corporate power in a way that I think is it's unrivaled.
Yeah, I actually agree with most of that. I don't have a problem. I mean, I have a theory as to why those people might be drawn to her that isn't necessarily even her fault. It isn't her fault. Although I think to me it does reflect even on domestic policy, some of where like, and look, it's cool. It's cool that there's actually a difference between what I think legitimately is some type of democratic socialist answer versus like a progressive answer, right?
Exactly.
So like to me,
that's the distinction.
And so I'm totally like, you wipe out fucking student debt. There's no new forms to fill out. There's no new like complications. Like you just do it, right? And so to me, like that simple structural stance is what appeals to me. But I think that where Warren is appealing to some of those people, I think first of all, I mean, there is a broad, totally irrational hatred of Bernie Sanders that is like really weird, and you don't have to support him, but like the relation, like the fact that people who are like Clinton fans can say with a straight face that Bernie Sanders is like in it for himself is like, I mean, there's a lot of like weird psychological stuff going on with a lot of these people's issues with Bernie. But I do think that like beyond that, there is that a draw of like, well, she went to Harvard Law School. She's an instructor at Harvard Law School, and she's the cult of smartness, which I have a wariness of, right? And I think that is applied to her. Now,
it's like describing my father, the cult of smartness.
The cult of smartness is describing most people's parents of that
No, I know,
generation,
but I mean,
like,
there is the fetishization of the wonkiness. I mean, I don't even, and I agree with you that it's not her fault, but it allows people to kind of reflect and say, oh, that's the adult in the room.
Right. And so to me, like part of my concern is like, I want to like where Elizabeth Warren stands out is not her intelligence. It is her willingness to say like, fuck the banks. Like that is where she is a different type of politician and has like a credible track record as somebody who's actually not just like another person who took a bunch of tests and then did this part of their career and that part of their career and blah, 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 blah. But the part that those people are responding to, and I think also now the way her campaign is branding is this like emphasis on plans and all of this stuff, which it's like, I mean, guys, like this is all going to be thrown out, you know, as soon as you get into any kind of legislative process. And like the only way you're going to have like a structure around it is, I do think in Sanders, like I think it's true. It's going to be a movement. That's the only way that any of this stuff has a prayer of passing.
I think those are great points. I mean, I don't blame her campaign for jumping on the plan thing, because she was really off to a very slow start, and what got her that traction was the substance and the plan and the wonkiness. So again, I don't even put that on her, and you know, it's because I'm a shill for her and getting paid by her campaign, obviously.
Wait, but you should disclose that. But right. Guys, can we put that Emma's a surrogate for what? I love it. Like, there's totally going to be people who actually take that literally.
Yeah.
Emma is not a paid campaign worker. For Elizabeth Warren.
I'm just trying. And, you know, I don't have a hill to die on, but this is my independent assessment of how they're doing and what I think is appealing to people.
Right.
And where I worry about Bernie, and I don't think I've talked about this. I've done this in private conversations. And
this is awesome. Bring us the first public.
So, right. So I'm massively supportive of him. I think he's, one of the greatest Americans of the past few decades, right? And
now you're gonna fucking smear.
And I'm gonna smear him. And I think he's the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump.
People should really look up what smear means.
Right.
By the way.
I know.
Incidentally,
it's
side note.
It doesn't matter.
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
But I worry that a lot of us in the progressive movement are underestimating the very strong desire to return to normalcy and to move away even from that populism. And it freaks people out because it's associated with the anger of 2016, whereas they want, it's what's entirely driving Biden. It's electability and normalcy. But Bernie does not represent normalcy. He represents an overhaul in the system. And there's this paranoia and fear of that Trump has created within the broader Democratic electorate, not people on Twitter, not people in the industry, but they want to just return to things just being sane, just being normal. And it's super unfair. It's unfair to say, you know, that Warren is establishment or that these people are drawn to her, whatever. It's super unfair that Bernie is being pigeonholed as divisive. It should not be that way. In fact, it's an outrage because he was trying to be as inclusive as possible and bringing his supporters into the fore, almost to a detriment, really, when I think he was way too soft on Hillary Clinton towards the end of his campaign. Because he recognized the threat of Donald Trump.
Right.
But now he's being painted as divisive, which is completely false. And there are a lot of people in the electorate that have internalized that. And they're so fearful of that divisiveness because the whole feeling of that whole just kind of unsettling attitude, they associate with Trump. So that's why Bernie, I don't think, is catching on that much right now. And I worry that he won't get the nomination purely because of that fear within the electorate that I think we're undervaluing. And that's not what I want at all. But
no, I think that's a valid fear. My concern would be, and because I mean, this is why I'm also somebody who said, you know, from the beginning, and we'll see, like, obviously he's fucking up, though I'm not always sure that Biden's fuck-ups even track as much as people like us think they track. Like, he's objectively falling in the polls.
We had this conversation last time, by the way.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think we might have even had it more than once. Like, I think Biden still does have a lane, unfortunately, and I think that he still is the lane that exists of people that are just about, I don't want to think about it, I just want this to end. And that totally exists in the electorate.
But that's Kamala Harris to an extent, and there is some of that with Warren, which she doesn't deserve those supporters, but she represents more normalcy than Bernie. She represents,
but if you start to, and I mean, my concern, I guess to be really, I think you're right. And my blunt concerns about Warren is that, one, I think if you really start narrowing the field, like if she actually goes ahead of Sanders, at least the part of that wing of people supporting her are super disingenuous. I don't think that that's necessarily a solid support.
Her support's soft
at the
right
end
now.
of the day, it will go. I think just as there's plenty of people who are really more committed to a sort of progressive politics, who I think will revert back to Bernie from her. I think that there is a contingent of people that are responding to her for these cultural identifying reasons that won't necessarily stay with her if it's between her and a Kamala Harris or a Joe Biden, right? And then more broadly, like I think in a general election, I think, like, yes, there's normalcy versus anger, but then there's also, like, what are the specific demographics that you actually have to, like, put a map together? So, like, I've always said, I think Kamala Harris is a super talented politician. I think she's charismatic. I think that she has a lot of, like, standard issue traits that you'd expect from somebody. Now, do I think that she is super well poised to, like, win Wisconsin? No, I don't. And whereas, like, luckily Bernie in that map, I think, is at a super advantage in terms of, like, and
he
Warren,
pulls better than Biden. Sorry, but but Biden pulls second, and so then that's, like, what's frustrating is, like, you can't even use that, or even though Bernie's the best candidate truly to win the Midwest, which is to win the presidency,
right? You
can't even use that. But Biden second. Okay, I don't know what that means, but
he needs to just keep hammering Biden on trade.
He hasn't done anything.
He did it a couple of weeks ago,
I
I
guess.
mean, we'll keep coaching Bernie.
Yeah, I want him.
They need to be more aggressive.
I'm worried.
Do you also think, though, with Warren, and I'll just be devil's advocate, I mean, she had a slippery rollout, then she was totally ignored, and and they were totally right, like, you know, we're talking about actual shit, and you guys are looking at, like, Beto and Buttigieg and all of these nonsense candidates.
Yep.
But for the past couple of months, she's had nothing but the wind behind her back.
Oh, totally.
When she gets some actual pushback, like, because that to me is, like, that's the contrast of Bernie, right? Like, it's relentless and constant assault and bias. So that disadvantages him because it starts to seep into the narrative, like you're saying. On the other hand, it's like, still at 15%. Like, every single person's against me, still raising my small donors, still doing it. With Warren, we have no idea. Like, she's at the phase where people are throwing her the towel, they're giving her the water. Like, this is awesome. I don't know what happens when she gets any pushback.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we're also going to see that with Kamala Harris, who's currently cresting upwards, right? So she's at the 30th percentile of her bell curve. Warren's probably going to go down a little bit, but I do think she holds more than people think, because again, what we're seeing with her the support of, or the ideology behind her supporters, is it's very fluid, which I don't think makes sense. But you know what? Sometimes things don't make sense. I think that you kind of bring it back to like the media being positive about her. It's also that fetishization of the intellectual elements, right? So the media can see her as more legitimate because she's doing all these concrete things, which I think a lot of them are really smart, but Bernie's talking about the same stuff. He's just doing it in a more populist way. And populism scares the shit out of the media. It scares the shit out of them. So even though Warren's a more classical liberal and they're talking basically about many of the same ideas, not, her foreign policy, going to APAC, I'm all against that. That scares me too, 100%.
Her foreign policy is awful.
Yeah, so it's
I could like lean into that hard. Like, it's really bad.
No, that's like an obvious weak point of her campaign, and I think that's going to be more fleshed out in debate number 2.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is right, is that the media really wants people to be substantive and intellectuals. And so she presents progressive policy in that way, whereas Bernie is more of a populist, and that scares them. That scares them. And they think that, Warren we can have a conversation with her about corporate interests, and she's a Harvard professor. She's a more intellectual. She'll be more amenable. Whereas Bernie is literally storming into Walmart executive boardrooms and telling off the executives there to pay their workers a higher wage. It's really different.
And I think, as what you said before, you totally could be right about people's desire for normalcy, 100%, and that could work against Bernie. But I think conversely, Buttigieg and Warren, and I'll say somewhat unfairly in her case, I think totally fairly in his case, I find the whole existence of him is fucking ludicrous. It is so driven by a very narrow set of people's narcissism and conception of themselves that has very little track with normal people.
Yeah, I don't think that's fair with her, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think it's not fair with her in terms of the totality of her record, but it's what they're responding to that you're talking about.
It's the image
they're
that
all
they're
about that she has degrees, that she talks in a certain way. And, again, I probably do have more skeptic. Like, I'm very dubious about sort of like building a brand on policy proposals for a variety of reasons, which I've talked about. But I think even regardless, like there's a way in which you can just hear like Buttigieg, he speaks Norwegian.
Right.
Warren, she taught at Harvard. I mean, my God.
Yeah.
Whereas for plenty of people, I don't like, those are not necessarily advantages at all. And I think that like Sanders, in a way that isn't either the anger or the sort of like brand identity of people who write about politics, is just kind of going out and saying to people like the Walmart workers, like, hey, you deserve to be treated a lot better. Let's do this in a way that's very simple and very approachable.
The difference between Buttigieg and Warren is that Warren's talking about so much substance and has a wonderful record to back it up on domestic policy, where I think it's like phenomenal.
Trash.
Buttigieg is trash.
Buttigieg is. I mean, and Buttigieg is also like. I mean, it's like run for president, lose, but build a profile, then go work at a bank and MSNBC for a couple of years, move to another state where you can run statewide. I mean, can we just say how fucking ridiculous is it that this guy is building the whole, like, I'm the Midwest guy. It's like, motherfucker, you run a college town that, incidentally, you're like shredding police brutality reports in between tweeting out, oh, congratulations, little Nas X. Oh, no, we're not going to investigate that. Fuck that. He's just like, oh, that was a proud moment. Oh, your son got tased? Get the fuck out of my office. Yeah. And he can't run statewide. And his whole brand, and this is another thing that pisses me off about the people who cover politics. Like, I'm not some fucking Midwest expert, but I could say like, hey, maybe a guy who is going from college town mayor to presidential candidate maybe there's a reason he's skipping some other steps.
Yeah. I got to make just one more point. I know we've been going on, but just to bring it back to what we're saying about how terrified the elites are of populism.
Yeah.
When you talk about degrees, they're more comfortable with people being Rhodes Scholars like Pete Buttigieg or going to these fancy schools and being intellectuals in their traditional sense because they are fundamentally undemocratic. They are fundamentally senatorial in the old school Roman sense, where they want these philosopher kings ruling and telling everyone how things are good for them and how this policy is actually going to help you when the people don't know best, and that it's all the smartest people in the room making decisions from the top down. That's why Bernie Sanders terrifies them. And Warren, to a lesser extent, even though I think that they're underestimating her progressivism, but they feel that she can be senatorial and that she can be this intellectual that they can have a debate with and make their elite conversations with. And
really quickly, before we get to these things, who is your least favorite Democrat besides Joe Biden? I feel like because that's probably the obvious pick. So who?
That's my obvious pick.
Who's the runner-up?
Beto.
Yeah. Woo. Why Beto more than Buttigieg?
Because I think that he's when we're talking about statewide office, he actually could beat Cornyn. And there's an arrogance to his run.
Oh yeah.
That bothers me even more. Like Buttigieg, it's like, I mean, that's arrogant too. So now you're making me rethink it. But
it's a tough one.
My disdain for both is pretty immeasurable.
It's high. I would say Buttigieg just because I feel like Beto's like raw need for love is very humanizing. Buttigieg is like a McKinsey android who was like developed to like gentrify. Just like, I understand your concern, black mother. However, I am meeting with Neera Tanden.
He was bred in a lab to be Harvard
Yeah.
Rhodes Scholar, Navy, or you know, being in the military.
Yeah.
Like,
Got called Alfred E. Newman in school, so we had to go kill Afghan villagers. Like, this is not good news.
He
folks.
really he has a Napoleonish complex for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
He's
Beto's
short. That's the joke.
And Beto's just like, yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Where's my love?
I know.
like Beto's just like a fucking doofus. He's just having,
I guess
like,
I
life hit
resent
him.
his half-assed Obama impression. It's just like, come on.
Is it half-assed or like over?
Your Bill Clinton impression you were doing earlier is like 6 times better than his Obama impression.
Well, he's so hyped up. Like what? Like Obama would give these speeches that they always had like that's why we need to come together,
Okay, well now that's
white
kind of
devils
like,
and what?
Now that's kind of sounding like Bill Clinton. I'm questioning.
I can't do Obama anymore. That's a problem. I need to get back into training. But like Beto, like Obama's had a arc, right? And Beto's all like, what did you say, Matt? It was like he already heard the Chariots of Fire music playing before he even started his speech.
Yeah, you can hear the
That's why I'm so excited and I'm so and it's like, dude, you need to fucking build to the applause line. You can't just like come out and applause line it.
He's kind of like the Chris Klein character in Election. Have you guys seen that?
Yes, that's actually a really good call.
Which
Although, see,
Reese Witherspoon is phenomenal.
And if Reese Witherspoon is Buttigieg, Chris Klein's a nicer guy. So I rest my case.
Reese Witherspoon's Hillary Clinton.
Reese Witherspoon is Hillary Clinton, but it could be Buttigieg.
It could be.
It could be Buttigieg. Okay. So
that was such a long, like much longer than we anticipated, but I was so happy to do it.
Yeah, that was great. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cubans for a second. You have a plan to deport them. Here's how I'm just playing.
Your plan. Your
Yang plan.
Yeah.
So we did some research and ran some numbers.
Crunch them.
And, we crunched some numbers and
all right, I don't even know how to set this up. How did you find this woman?
Literally first person I spoke to.
Was there something appealing about how she was like disdainfully holding an ice cream cone? Like she already looks kind of pissed even before you're talking to her.
Like I just kind of walked into the crowd and she was the first person sitting there, seriously. And then after it was done, I'm getting surrounded by guys wearing InfoWars shirts screaming at me towards the end of the interview, and we're like trying to decide, Asher, my lovely camera woman, just the two of us there. I mean, but this, I was saying this earlier, and this was way safer because there were a lot of police there at the debate. But we were trying to decide if we should interview more supporters, and I was like, let's just go out on a high note. Like, we needed one and done with this woman. She was.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what else do you need?
She was phenomenal.
We got it. She did exactly what she needed to do. I would almost go so far as to say she was a crisis actor played by Jank. Just playing.
Do you think Joe Biden is a socialist?
Yes.
Yes.
How would you define socialism?
It's my favorite shit.
I define socialism when you bring down your own country, your own race, because he's not black.
Pause it.
And
I'm sorry. I'm a socialist. I define socialism in a very similar way.
Because he's not black.
Yeah, no, because it's about bringing down your own country and race. I say that regularly on this show. I don't know what's so controversial about that.
I don't like my follow-up question here, so I'm going to critique myself. I think I'm kind of trying to lead her into a different response, and so just keep in mind that I'm always scouting myself, self-scouting myself.
This is like the tape. This is like the post-game tape.
Yeah, no, I'm
film session.
I'm right. I'm having my Aaron Rodgers film session.
That's great, and it doesn't make me look good because every time I play one of my TV appearances, I'm like, this is another fucking awesome thing that I did.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward that. You're much more mature than me. Okay, let's go ahead.
I define socialism when you bring down your own country, your own race. Because he's not black.
He's not black.
And
what does that mean? Bringing him down to black people? Is that what you're saying?
No. He's saying that the white people.
I'm not getting it.
He doesn't look at himself in the mirror.
So he.
To be fair, I don't know what the correct follow-ups to some of these statements is.
I was trying to get her to say. I was like, oh my God, what? Who did I just start talking to?
Would you say that Joe Biden is friendly with Castro?
I should say that.
He's saying that the white people.
Joe Biden should use this as a campaign.
He doesn't look at himself in the mirror.
I don't know what she's talking about.
That's what I look at.
Race. That's what
hey,
saying.
You talk about the white people, and look at you.
Well, he actually.
You know I don't like him. I'll tell you exactly why I don't like him. He's got a big ego. He thinks he's better than God.
Okay, hold on. When that happened, so first of all, how much does my back hurt right now?
I was gonna say you look super uncomfortable.
I should have knelt, but it was outside and I'm wearing a dress. When she said that about his ego, I mean, you could just see the wheels turning in my mind. Like, oh my God, it's happening.
Well, we have a perfect profile of a smirk. You see that?
My lips are curling up like the Joker.
Trump said he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it.
No, I don't think so.
He did say that.
No, he didn't.
So.
No,
it's on tape.
No, I don't believe it. No, that's fake.
I swear to God, you can watch it.
Fake news.
Yes.
Fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
The amount of times I try to take.
Do you want to watch the video?
They say I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that?
Sorry. Did you actually show this to her?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say.
So I intercut it, but I mean, I didn't
clearly,
have the time.
But yeah.
She just
I thought you actually pulled it up on your phone or something.
I wish. I mean, it was just like it's these things are chaotic.
It wouldn't have made any difference anyway.
Yeah.
It would have made absolutely no difference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if she could have heard the video either. It's like so loud there.
Democrats, do any of them appeal to you?
Liars. All liars. The Pinocchio keeps growing.
Anti-Semite.
Okay.
And then you yourself won't have a country. You yourself won't have a country. Keep believing all these liars, and you yourself will be out of your country. Socialism doesn't work wherever it goes.
But why is Joe Biden a socialist?
Why is Joe Biden a socialist? Because it's all about the money. I mean,
socialism is about.
The thing is that Joe Biden is all about the money.
I don't know what you guys are laughing about.
It's all about the power, the money.
I think.
I learned this in.
Excuse me. Pause it.
Gov 101.
I want to bring down my race and country, and I'm all about money and power. Yes.
Yes.
Patreon.com/TMBS. Thank you.
Trump's a billionaire.
Yes, and so is Joe Biden.
No.
He's not.
Yes.
Trump went bankrupt 4 times.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
Also,
no, he didn't.
Hold on one sec. The celebrity net worths, like, those are so fake online, but he's not a billionaire. There's no chance. There's no estimate that comes even close to him being a billionaire. He's not a billionaire.
I don't believe Trump was a billionaire either, for what it's worth.
Yeah, but
I mean, but no, Joe Biden is definitely not a
Obama
billionaire.
had to lend him money.
Yeah, he did. VP.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Fucking lazy white boy.
Trump went bankrupt 4 times. 6.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And that's business.
He did.
How many people? Okay, you go bankrupt. How many people don't start all over again after a bankruptcy?
Fuck yeah. Stay on it.
Oh, yeah, so that's not the full one, but yeah, no.
That's not so. Wait, what happened next?
Oh, I mean, I talked about, she talked about how Trump was responsible for bringing jobs to the United States. I said, well, you know that he's come under fire for hiring undocumented immigrants multiple times. She didn't understand. Whatever.
Lies.
I mean, lies.
Lies.
Yeah, but that clip was, Keith Boykin, like, messaged me, like, can I tweet this out? And I was like, yes, please. Like, you have hundreds of thousands of followers. Sure.
Who's Keith Boykin?
He's a CNN guy.
Oh, he's a CNN guy.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. He asked you if he could. That's funny.
It was nice. He was so courteous.
Keith, absolutely not.
Yeah, no, don't give my
Do not
work
promote
exposure.
my work. Ever. I'm a socialist.
I know. I was like, I'm such an idiot. I should have had him linked to the full interview so we could, whatever. This is like me after a long work day.
You could definitely process it out. It's totally fine. Yeah. I don't think this is going to help after a long work. You know what? I can't. We'll get to Tom Steyer in a second. Let's just do a little bit more fun because Tom Steyer pisses me off.
Oh my God.
So, okay, what do you think would make you feel some genuine sympathy for Andrew Yang?
I mean,
maybe meeting Meghan McCain.
That's where you're going with it.
That's where I'm going with it. I'm leaning on this heavily. No, because every time I've criticized Andrew Yang, and we will talk about that in a second, among the endless meltdowns that I get from Yang people, and we all get, Matt has had weeks-long arguments with these people on Twitter.
I've been back and forth with Scott Santos.
Oh, is he the... He's one of the big...
He's the it's not left, it's right, it's forward, guys.
Below me. Jesus Christ.
They love making inexplicable graphs all the time.
Yeah,
They're really funny.
Like, look, this is the human flourishing curve.
That sounds like Tom Steyer's actual campaign slogan. It's
yeah,
not left,
Tom
it's
Steyer...
Right.
Tom Steyer and Yang should team up.
Wasn't Obama in 2012 forward? Wasn't that his campaign slogan?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, you're right.
Sucks.
Forward to fascism is what I mean.
Yeah, fast forward through these next 4 years.
4 more years of me and then an inbred white boy. It's going to bring you fascism.
Let me tell you what, you're not.
You got it back.
Not ready, white people?
You got it back.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're
Came back.
Barry's back.
Barry's back.
Barry White, that is. Is he alive?
Remember when he just totally dogged Hillary Clinton? That was great. It's just like...
Barry White?
No, yeah, Barry White.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Barry White was not going to campaign for Hillary Clinton. No, but the Obama one where it's just like, I had everything queued up for her. Obama had such a... no one loathes Hillary Clinton more than me, but Obama's just like total like... Everything was fucking great. Yeah, Beyonce, the economy's humming. Yeah. I read that. I was just like,
did I mention Beyonce?
Yeah. It's like, dude, you set her up perfectly, buddy.
Obama.
There's a lot of problems.
There was we just were earlier in the show talking about intellectual arrogance, and that was Obama's biggest problem and part of the media flowery coverage fetishization of that was that exact same thing. So president of the Harvard Law Review.
Yes, that was like the biggest. That this is seriously the most important credential of these people. So, Andrew Yang supporters though always say he's a really nice guy, and you're being unfair to him, which is an interesting metric for judging somebody who claims to be running for president. That said, I will say in a collision course between Andrew Yang and Meghan McCain, there is one person that appears like a sentient human being. And the other person is Meghan McCain. Let's check this out.
Closing the wealth gap, especially when it comes to the African-American community. Reparations a part of that?
Well, Martin Luther King championed a dividend for all Americans. I think that's where we should start, $1,000 a month for every American. And then reparations is a whole separate issue because the $1,000 dividend doesn't address the historical legacy of slavery.
Why should rich white people get $1,000 a month?
Well, the great thing is that it'll remind them that they're still an American.
DSA member, Joy Baker.
Shut
but
up.
in Alaska,
sorry.
But in Alaska, they have a dividend.
margin. I love
is an
it.
extra $1,000 a month.
But in Alaska, they have a dividend of $1,000.
Well, I wouldn't
give it away
feel.
to charity.
Wait, hold on. Can we just pause real quick?
Yeah.
Wait, did he say? I just when I said shut up, I thought I heard him say it's because the rich people are still American, right? That's what
No,
he
it
said.
would remind them that they're American.
Oh,
is what he said,
well,
which
that
is slightly
sucks.
better.
That sucked too, but I thought he was trying to pull the whole Joe Biden argument. Like,
No, he was saying it would remind them that they're American. So now,
oh, okay, that's definitely better, but
still sucks.
Annoying.
I like the way I like what Bhaskar said a couple weeks on the show, which is like, if you're running like a pure issue campaign that has no chance of actually winning, like why do you insist on dodging questions like you're actually running with margins? Like just say you support reparations or don't.
Right.
There's like really no need to like equivocate. You're at like 0%.
I am very interested why the media suddenly cares about reparations.
Yes. Why do you think?
Because it was initially a way to go after Bernie, and now it's caught on.
That goes back to 2016. I mean, Hillary Clinton. I remember when Ta-Nehisi Coates published a very thoughtful Coates-style critique of Sanders. I didn't agree with it, but I thought he raised some legitimate critiques. And then people in the Clinton campaign were pushing it. I remember being like,
yeah,
I don't remember.
It's so disingenuous.
I don't
'cause it'll
see
never,
the Marcus Garvey section of Hillary Clinton's website. Like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And even to this day, I think there's one candidate who actually supports reparations as they are properly understood as a policy set, and that's our girl, the real second choice,
Marianne
Williamson.
And hers are entirely insufficient.
I can't believe that you would be running around saying that is true. The number should be higher, but she's the only one supporting. I can't believe you run around saying that Warren's the second choice. We both know that Marianne Williamson is running.
I just have to say this. There's not one presidential candidate who will institute reparations if they become president of the United States. I am telling you this now, and I'm frustrated that it's becoming a litmus test in the media because it's just not. It's disingenuous, and Bernie isn't saying he's going to do it because he is not going to lie about it.
What's really disingenuous is that all the other candidate, like what's so disingenuous, it's doubly disingenuous, right? Because like you can go back to Obama actually said like several years like, yeah, it's not going to happen. What we need to do is have programs that disproportionately blah, 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 like making the same argument that actually Sanders supporters made, right? And I understand why people that support reparations want a separate, distinct program that deals specifically with that issue.
Yes.
Absolutely. But the thing that's so amazing is that like you have Sanders not committing to it and then still making his broader social democratic argument, which would have a huge redistributive effect. And then you have, and in this case, Warren is somebody who's done this.
I know.
Harris and Warren and Castro, get the fuck out of here, saying that they support it. And then it's like, literally like, and then you drill into details. You're like, oh, so you mean like you support Professor Doherty's plan to actually set up like a community reinvestment, like a bank that will specifically trigger cash to descendants of slaves, like an actual policy proposal. And then they just go, oh, no. All these other things that we all sort of like broadly support about like social funding will have a redistributive effect. It's like, wow, that's
exactly what Bernie's saying.
But it's what he's saying, although not as broad.
Yeah.
And it's disrespectful to those who advocate for reparations because that is not what reparations is. I mean, it's profoundly cynical.
Okay. Well, now The View who deeply cares about reparations, all of them sitting at that table.
Meghan McCain, deep thinker.
Need to ask Andrew Yang about it.
It's an extra $1,000 a month.
But in Alaska, they have a dividend of $1,000.
Well, I wouldn't
give it away to charity.
I wouldn't feel right. I mean, when there's still veterans on the street and helpless.
You could give it away. But that's what you could use
it away to charity.
That's what he means when he says it reminds you you're in America.
Megan just can't accept the idea that she could give her $1,000 away to homeless veterans every.
No, it's very upsetting.
You could just do an auto pay, Megan.
It doesn't. It's not just about what you do for yourself. It's what you do for other folks.
And in Alaska, they give a dividend to everyone in Alaska from the petroleum fund, $1,000 to $2,000 a year.
Wait, can we just? I'm sorry.
Did you see that?
Yeah,
face?
It's Megan. It's not just what you do for yourself. It's what you do for other people.
I mean,
what the fuck? Other people? Fuck that.
My father was John McCain.
The only other person I know is John McCain. Did you know there's a boat named after him?
That's not the last glare you're going to get in this clip either.
Oh, yeah.
And in Alaska, they give the dividend to everyone in Alaska from the petroleum fund, $1,000 to $2,000 a year. And it depoliticizes it. It destigmatizes it. It's just everyone gets it. And so there's no, like, oh, you get it, I don't.
Right.
Immigration.
I'm the son of immigrants myself. I think we need to create a path to citizenship over the long term.
So you also have some unusual and I would say unorthodox stances as well. You came out against circumcision.
Unusual.
Why can't you just say unusual or unorthodox?
No, she's
what is the necessary? What is so fucking necessary? Like
because redundancy is intellectualism.
Okay, beautiful. You just summarized it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Stances as well. You came out against circumcision, correct?
My uncle's Joe
I
Lieberman.
think parents need to educate themselves on what the health information is. My wife and I obviously made a certain determination, but it should be in the hands of the parents.
In the hands of what?
The parents.
Because when you have a male baby,
I fucking love Joy Behar.
They try to just toss
Joy
it.
with the solid dick.
You also believe in free marriage counseling?
Yeah, the data shows that if you grow up in a two-parent household, certain outcomes are more likely. And so from a societal perspective, it makes perfect sense to try and keep couples together if they want to stay together.
I'm sorry, just look at that face.
I know.
I would never think anything that she could turn into something about her dad, which maybe is what she's doing in her head, I get triggers her. Anything that might threaten her trust fund. He didn't even say the obvious thing, which you should say, which is like, I support Medicare for all and psychiatric care, including marriage counseling, will be covered under it. I have no idea why this specifically set her off, but look at her face.
I have. Yeah.
Why do you think this set her off?
I have difficulty keeping my composure when I'm debating conservatives, specifically on cable shows and stuff. So, or not cable shows, but internet shows that try to act like cable. And so I kind of make that face too.
But not because some like bewildered presidential candidate said that he wants to do marriage counseling. Like, what do you say? Like, no, you
bewildered presidential candidate.
Not somebody saying like, yeah. All right, okay.
Sorry.
Check out this response.
Would that just be like a social worker for every couple in America?
Well, it'd be like a marriage counseling, stipend essentially, where it's like if you decide to seek marriage counseling, then they can just go and get paid by.
My version of marriage counseling is drinking Jack Daniels, shooting some guns, and hanging out. So like my version.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! It hurts so much.
I can't even look. It's so embarrassing to watch this.
You are not some homegirl from Arkansas. You're the daughter of a fucking multi-millionaire senator who ran for president. Drinking Jack Daniels. You sound like you're in a really healthy marriage. Drink our problems away.
I like how like Andrew Yang is so literal that he's hearing that and he's just like, it actually sounds like we probably should deploy somebody to help you out immediately. I crunched some of the numbers. And between you being your father's daughter, which is literally the only reason you're sitting here, and anybody knows who you are, you're not just annoying somebody and accosting a waiter at Applebee's somewhere.
Between your intoxication plus your use of guns, I've determined that your husband's in danger.
Yeah, I also understand that your husband is it true that he's an active plagiarizer, at least in the past?
Is that actually true?
Yeah, he did plagiarize in the past, at least.
Fun fact.
At least in the past.
And hasn't Meghan McCain basically said that she married her husband because she was like freaked out that Trump was elected?
I mean, she said it definitely hastened the timeline there because of how heady things got.
Beta.
Go and get paid by.
My version of marriage counseling is drinking Jack Daniels, shooting some guns, and hanging out. So like my version is different than it works. No, just like going to a range. So I'm just saying like this universal peg for every hole is always my problem.
Just like going to a range.
Right now. There's not every
like fucking getting loaded before going to the range.
No, just going to a range. That's it. That makes it weirder. You're not. I think that's illegal. Probably not. It's got to be.
Yeah, no.
Should be.
So should we like Andrew Yang more now?
Oh, I mean, was that it?
That was it. That was Andrew Yang having a touch of humanity compared to Meghan McCain.
He's look, I think he's far from the worst candidate in the race. I like that he's trying to be creative, but universal basic income, at least proposed by him, I think presents some real problems. I mean, least, we could cha-ching. Math.
If you just add it on top of everything else. Like, look, if Bernie came out and said, in addition to everything else, I'm also going to claw back $1,000 a month for everybody from taxing Amazon. Cool.
Yeah. Well,
but a VAT tax.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's the biggest problem with his proposal, right? Is that it's paid for by a value-added tax, as was broken down by Current Affairs so brilliantly, and Vox has done some good pieces on it too. Is really, that's a regressive tax. It's a tax on spending, and it's going to affect poor people so much more. And the idea that he's making this argument instead of saying, okay, like, I'll pay for it with a speculative tax on Wall Street. All right, great. Let's do that. Then I'm way more open to hearing that. But why are you trying to implement it through this regressive tax that would disproportionately harm poor people? It's the conservative argument. Sales taxes are conservative, and spending taxes are conservative principles. So it's bewildering to me. It's almost like he didn't even entirely think it through.
No, I think I think it's fundamental. You could see in his plan that his version of UBI is a UBI to prevent people from basically falling out and starving in the street. It's meant to protect like concentrations of wealth. That's why he's not willing to talk about it.
Right.
And
that's why he says it's impossible. I mean, with Mehdi Hassan, and I know there'll be people who immediately freak out and say that he said something slightly different in another interview. But I think he pretty clearly said to Mehdi Hassan that basically something like a Wall Street transaction tax would be politically impossible. So this fusion of like not left, not right, forward, futurism combined with like, oh, well, we can't solve big problems. Right. So maybe we can get a little bit of a rebate from Mark Zuckerberg for you to sit in your room and play video games is pretty depressing.
No, but I think a lot of people have been talking about his former nonprofit too.
The Manhattan
the Venture for America.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, where he basically what he did is he got very well-off kids from Ivy League schools to go into troubled areas where they then were able to
marriage counseling.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they were supposed to create startups that were going to be successful.
They just hired from outside.
They just hired from outside, and these people all of them left those small towns. So basically, what happened is like they got investment from big donors to prop up a bunch of wealthy kids to go into Baltimore for 6 months, then move to Los Angeles.
Yeah. I think Andrew Yang should do celebrity marriage counseling for VH1 and advocate for UBI in his spare time. I would like to see him counsel Meghan McCain and her husband.
Does VH1 still exist?
It has to still exist. Where else I'm going to see Ghostface deal with his marriage life?
They're going to be subsidized on $1,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, the last thing too is I don't understand how. Actually, we should probably support UBI immediately. The UBI automatically attached to Patreon. And other.
Yang's gonna do some venture capitalist thing with Patreon and institute it into
probably was like, and then everybody else can have a podcast, and the other people can pay for a podcast, and
it's
we thought that'd be a really
everyone.
Effective way of dealing with the robot apocalypse.
What about? But also the other thing too that I don't understand, and people just wave this away, but it's like, okay. Maybe not in rural areas, but if you did a UBI in New York, over half of that will immediately go to landlords. Like if you don't couple that with, and you're just making this shit up, you might as well just say, and there'll be a national law that this is a fund that, specifically cannot be funneled into added rent or what, like, you would have to immediately set a precaution around that, which they don't do. And I don't understand how you think practically that wouldn't be immediately absorbed into rent.
It would just exacerbate racial issues too. I mean, the fact that it would elevate whiter people in rural areas, whiter, it would go poor longer, people. Right. And additionally, it would get rid of the specified safety net programs that help poor, often minority people, sometimes in urban areas. So it would disproportionately help rural areas and harm urban ones. And then on top of it, take away social programs that are beneficial in urban poor areas as well.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't understand. Like, I get the idea and principle of a universal basic income being something that maybe people want to be talking about in the national conversation, but his iteration of it is regressive and based on some fundamentally conservative principles. So I like that he's thinking differently and outside the box, but at the same time, that I really, really don't like how it would be implemented. I think it's terrifying, but you know what? Like, he's never going to be president, so whatever.
Wouldn't it be cool if he started campaigning like Trump, though?
Yeah.
Like, I was just thinking of him being like, "Oh, fuck you,
Yeah.
Emma from the Failing Young Turks."
You know, I mean, and he's done stuff with TYT. I have this you know.
Current affairs. Who's Nathan Robinson? The guy's a total loser.
Yeah.
That's not even a real
Why
British
did he go on
accent.
Dave Rubin's show? Because of all the things we just said.
Yeah, because
That's
of
why.
literally everything we just said.
I know,
Yeah.
but you know, I guess I'm coming full circle once again back to supporters. Oh, he's a nice guy. Like, I don't even know, you know?
I think he's a
What am
snake.
I?
Can you really? You think he's a snake?
Yeah.
Like a snake in the grass. I mean, you can't get along with Dave Rubin for 3 hours unless there's something wrong with you.
I mean, look, he goes on Ben Shapiro's show, he goes on Dave Rubin's show, and then this story comes out about how his Discord has a bunch of racists, and like, he's fishing where he's fishing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, before we get to the post game, we just have to do this because I have to sit. Emma and I, obviously, we're texting, we're figuring out what we're going to talk about. We had a show planned, and we're going to talk about Marianne Williamson in the post game. Don't worry about it. But she hit me up late this morning. She said, we need to add this. I am so fucking excited that Tom Steyer is running for president. Warren has been my number 2.
Yeah.
But now there's a strong contender for the second place spot. Do we actually want to subject ourselves to Tom Steyer's announcement video?
I guess, isn't it like 4 to 5?
Well, we're not
minutes
going to play all. We're going to give us like a 50-second dose of this.
Tom.
And then maybe in the 50 seconds, we can come up with a list of like, I don't know, several things each that he could put the same amount of money that he's literally going to burn.
Hold on frame 1, I have a comment.
Yes.
Sitting in a barn. You're still a fucking billionaire.
Yeah, right. You're saying, yeah. I love it was like he's driving through this bucolic landscape, which is literally probably like his landscape.
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind. All right, let's play 50 seconds of this.
Tom Steyer, one of the most influential activists in Democratic Party politics.
Is the founder and president of Next Gen America.
I think what people believe is that the system has left them. I think people believe that the corporations have bought the democracy, that the politicians don't care about or respect them.
We gotta look that
oh my
up.
God, because of his voice?
Not working
Yes.
for them.
I'm
They're
not
actually
wrong.
working for the people who have rigged the system.
He passed away recently, right?
Really what we're doing is trying to make democracy work by pushing
Hold on. We
California
gotta
voters are
pause it.
getting a chance to do what
He is a major Democratic donor.
Right.
How are you tackling corporate power or making the system worse? I mean, you're making it worse.
Well, why doesn't he give
You're a
his
part
money
of the
to
problem.
any number? Well, he could give it to anti-gerrymandering groups. He could give it to voting rights groups.
Yes.
He could give it to state, local candidates. I mean, he literally could do millions of things.
It's because he wants
100 million
control. And that's exactly the fucking problem that he's saying that he cares about. I'm already
Yes.
enraged.
No, this is great.
I gotta
love
stop
you.
swaying. I'm hitting the table. I'm sorry, guys.
It's totally fine. They can deal with it.
Make democracy work by pushing power down to the people.
California voters are getting a chance to do what California lawmakers failed to do.
Prop 56 got a lot of support at the polls.
The oil company sponsored a new ballot initiative to halt California's new law.
I was born in 1957. I grew up right in the middle of the civil rights.
I'm sorry. When he's bragging about how corporations are and what he's done, like what the government has failed to do, that's not a positive. It's
Right.
not a positive that corporations are filling the vacuum left by the government. It's the exact problem that you're exacerbating by donating to them. Okay.
Revolution and the Vietnam War. The underlying...
Wait. He was born in 1957 and he wants props for the great social insurgencies of the 1960s? What the fuck? You know, when I run for president, I'm going to be like, I was born during the Sandinista Revolution.
I was born like
Same shit.
2 weeks before Kurt Cobain died.
Exactly.
I led the counterculture.
You were part of that movement.
Mm-hmm.
The underlying injustice in America was coming under attack. My father graduated from Yale Law School at 21.
Relatable.
Started being a lawyer, then he went into the Navy because of Pearl Harbor. And then at the end of the war, they sent him over to be assistant to the chief prosecutor of Nuremberg. I think my father looked at being in the service or being at Nuremberg as like, you have your duty, you do it. My parents
so your
were
dad would be
very uncompromising
totally not
about doing the right thing.
Steyer and his wife
do
are
it.
worth an estimated $1.5 billion.
Why would you include that?
So what? Yeah, I mean, seriously though, like in a couple of minutes here, like what is this purely like I've made $1 billion. I've lived a life. I want to run for president. Being in the Senate would suck. I have $100 million. Let's see what happens.
Pretty much.
That's it. I mean, I don't want to just like dwell on like the cliche of boomer narcissism. And there is like millennial narcissism, obviously, and there's certainly Generation X mediocrity and narcissism. But like, what is this?
Yeah.
I mean, even a couple of months ago, he had the good sense of saying, I'm not actually going to do this.
Yeah.
And then the whole impeachment melodrama that he's been pushing is a giant hustle just to get people's emails, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, how should we respond to that? And then his whole pitch goes on. It's like quite a left-wing pitch.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, what does this say to you about who's been empowered by how we've done politics?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is like kind of what I was saying before about how people feel so disenchanted by and unrepresented by Congress and by their government that they want to turn to alternate sources. And we saw this with Donald Trump and narcissistic billionaires who are tangentially involved and who have, not even tangentially, who are not like faces in Congress, but who are pulling strings behind the scenes and have been involved in politics in their own fucked up way, feel like they can be that outsider voice to break through that fog. But it's a narcissism that's emboldened by money and anybody that they consultants that they can hire and tell them that they can be great and that they can be successful. And it's like this deeply misguided sense of what an outsider is. Because in reality, Tom Steyer, you're the ultimate insider.
Right.
You're the ultimate establishment. And unlike Trump, who was a reality star, who's actually really great at reading the room and insulting people,
Right.
You're an empty suit and no one gives a fuck about your grandfather or your father.
Boom. I think in the postgame we'll ask who's worse, Beto, Schultz, Steyer, or Buttigieg. I'm always going Buttigieg. Like, no doubt I'd vote for Steyer over Buttigieg. I'll own that.
Interesting.
100%.
I might too, just on campaign.
He reminds me of
go so
Funkhauser.
hard, when I come on your show, I feel almost bad, but I guess this is actually how I feel. So
Yeah, this is it.
I should just let it go.
We keep it real here.
Yeah.
Become a patron of the show today. This last weekend, we did an illicit history of the National Security Council with Daniel Bessner. This weekend, we have a think tank session. Of course, come see us live in Chicago. We're really excited about that, August 24th. Lots more information coming out in the coming weeks about my book, patreon.com/TMBS. I want to thank every single person who makes this show possible. We have a ton to get to in the postgame, including, of course, a debunk. Can Ben Burgess defend himself? I mean, Jesse Lee Peterson called him a beta in a pretty convincing way. See if he can out-logic his way from that. Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, Emma Vigeland's going to be staying with us
Fun.
for the postgame Rebel HQ.
Yep.
Jess?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
All right, guys. See you soon.